was about oppression. And you said you got quite...
Yeah, because I already know what you're gonna ask me, and I'm just gonna tell you this now. It's not my job to educate you and school you on that. And if you don't know...
But if I reject your presuppositions, then you do need to explain to me.
No, I'm telling you this. I'm telling you, like, it's not my job to school you. Like, you should have learned this in school. And honestly, it's a little scary that you don't know how women have been oppressed in the past.
Well, to be honest, in the Philippines, we don't learn about oppression in school. Women oppression in school. They don't mention that. They don't teach us that. She doesn't want to discuss it, maybe because she doesn't really know.
Like, this country was, like, built for men. And these, like, it's all to, like... for men, you know, like it was built for men.
Women were oppressed in history, but so were men. It's not
as much as women were.
This is interesting, because if I say how were women were oppressed, you're like, well, it's self-evident, Brian. I shouldn't have to educate you. Yet you've just asked me the same question. You've just asked, how were men oppressed? Shouldn't you know?
No, because that wasn't taught in school.
So isn't that interesting? Male oppression was never taught in school, but females' oppression was.
Is there men oppression though? Before?
So who's really oppressed?
Or just now?
Oh,
perhaps you don't even believe men are oppressed.
Don't, to be honest.
You don't?
Yeah. There's men.
Can you think of one? Give me one.
So many men literally killed all the time over domestic violence and domestic abuse, to the point where...
That's irrelevant, but okay.
Okay.
That happened.
How about Johnny Depp? Yeah, he was abused, right?
There's certainly violence, sure.
Yeah, there is a lot of violence against
But
women.
when you think of oppression, what is your definition of oppression?
I
mean, you use the word, you ought to know how to define it if you just use the word.
Yeah, I just don't know exactly how to, like, why do you want me to explain that? That's what I'm getting.
Well, I mean, you've used a word, you ought to be able to...
Yeah, you're just putting me on the spot. You just want to embarrass me. And I'm going to tell you this now. It's not going to happen, Brian. Because guess what? I'll dip right now.
Because we're having a polite conversation?
No, because I already know what this is about. We talked about this last podcast, so why do you want to bring it up again?
Well, we didn't really talk about it.
Okay, well, I'm not going to say anything else.
Well, I mean, that's a very
And I'm not going to say anything else, and I'm going to stay quiet now.
I mean, that's a very convenient way to shut down a otherwise polite conversation. I gave you an opportunity to speak, so I think you should. Like, it's totally okay to have a conversation about, I suppose, what is for you an uncomfortable subject. But I don't see why you need to shut down the conversation. Like, I've been perfectly polite.
Because they don't know what they're fighting for. They don't know exactly what they're talking about.
That's true. So many, like, why would I have to explain it to you, Brian?
I think they don't know about what's really happening already. I don't know if it's just nowadays, but I'm hearing a lot of men who also get abused by their partners. Nobody talk about it. The reason why nobody knows about it, these women don't know about it because men don't speak about it. Men don't speak about their experience.
Be respectful. I'm not going to say anything more about it because I feel uncomfortable talking about it.
Why? But you weren't uncomfortable until I started pushing back on you.
Yeah.
I will at least address the points that you brought up. You said that basically the patriarchy theory, that men built this country for other men. Now, I agree with you on the first part. Men did build this country. However, men didn't build it for the benefit of other men. They built it for their families, their wives, their sons, their daughters. So I agree with you that yes, this country and all countries, in fact, have been built on the backs of men, but it's not for the benefit of other men. In fact, they've actually done studies on this. Men have an out-group bias. So men have an out-group bias for women, whereas women have an in-group bias for other women. In other words, the sisterhood. There's a sisterhood amongst women. There's not a brotherhood amongst men, at least to the same degree that there's a sisterhood amongst women. Every single thing that you see around you, the buildings you live in, the streets you drive in, the infrastructure that you rely on to survive, was all built, created, and is maintained by good, honest, hardworking men that simply want to provide for their family. It's not men wanting to oppress women. It's just men that want to work and provide for their family.
Then why couldn't women vote?
Because men were subject to military conscription.
Because women didn't want to vote either.
Observation about it. I don't know what's the exact reason why they have that rule before that women are not allowed to vote. But what I've noticed is women's judgment and decisions is heavily affected by their emotions.
Isn't that correct?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, the reason, by the way, throughout the vast majority of human history, men didn't have the vote either. There was a small percentage of men who had power. The rest of the men were also oppressed alongside all of the women that were oppressed. It was like, previously you had tyrants and kings and dictators. Men couldn't vote. This is like voting came around in, like, broadly speaking, in the 1900s, the late 1800s, 1900s, and now obviously, in 1920 is when women got the right to vote. So this voting thing's very new. Democracy is very new. Most people never had the right to vote. The way men had the right to vote was because of warfare. Because men could be drafted and sent to fucking the Maginot Line in France and go in the trenches and get trench foot and get chemical gassed. And to this day, women were able to secure the vote without the corresponding responsibility. Women have a right without a responsibility. Men have a right with a responsibility. That responsibility is you have to die for your